What if the only person who truly saw you was being forced to forget you? Hey everyone, and welcome back to Real Love, the place where we dive into the most captivating stories that feel as real and as powerful as the emotions they evoke. Today, we are continuing our journey into the chilling, psychological world of the Memory Weavers of Whisperwood. If you're new here, you are about to step into a story that is so much more than just a fantasy. It's an exploration of trust, identity, and the desperate fight to hold on to love when reality itself is being rewritten. This book will challenge you, it will make you question everything, and it will show you the incredible strength it takes to trust your own heart against all odds. The benefits aren't just in the escape. They're in feeling that powerful struggle and rooting for a love that refuses to be erased. So, get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's lose ourselves in the beautiful, dangerous world of Whisperwood. The story continues. Now, summary. For readers of Holly Black and V.E. Schwab comes a gripping psychological fantasy about a love that might be the only thing worth trusting in a world of beautiful, dangerous lies. For 17-year-old empath Elara, her love for the vibrant, free-spirited Chloe is the only truth in a world of overwhelming emotional noise. It's a connection so pure, she's certain it's unbreakable. When Chloe invites her for a perfect weekend at her family's idyllic, secluded home, it feels like a dream come true. But Whisperwood is not a sanctuary, it's a gilded cage. Elara quickly discovers that the Chloe's picture-perfect family are the architects of an unimaginable psychological prison. They are memory weavers, a coven with the terrifying ability to prune and rewrite Chloe's mind, erasing her desires and suppressing a latent power they fear. Her girlfriend isn't just being manipulated, she's being curated, her very personality rewritten to ensure her obedience. When Elara tries to expose the truth, she becomes the family's next target. They don't resort to violence. They wage a masterful war of psychological terror, using their abilities to gaslight Elara, expertly twisting her perception of reality until she begins to question not only the evidence before her, but her own sanity. In a battle where the ultimate prize is the narrative of reality itself, how can you save someone who doesn't remember needing to be saved? What happens when your greatest weapon, your own mind, becomes your enemy's playground? And how can you prove the truth when the only person who shares it has had the memory wiped clean? The Memory Weavers of Whisperwood by Real Love. Chapter 1. The roar of the crowd was a physical thing, a wave of noise that crashed against my bones. Under the harsh glare of the stadium lights, the air tasted of popcorn, wet grass, and the collective frantic hope of 1,000 people willing a ball across a painted line. It was the kind of chaotic energy that usually made my teeth ache, a jumbled mess of emotions I couldn't filter out. But tonight, I had an anchor. Her name was Chloe. From my seat on the top bleacher, I watched her. She wasn't on the field, she was 2 sections over, a bright splash of color in her yellow jacket, surrounded by a laughing circle of friends. Her hair, the color of dark honey, caught the light as she threw her head back, her smile a perfect, brilliant curve. To anyone else, she was the picture of careless joy, but I could feel the truth. Beneath the laughter, a thin, anxious wire of tension was humming inside her. It was a familiar frequency, a low thrum of worry about the calculus exam we had on Monday. It vibrated against my senses, a discordant note in the symphony of her happiness. I hated it. I closed my eyes for a second, tuning out the shouts of the quarterback and the shrill blast of a whistle. I focused on that single, anxious thread. I found its frayed edges in my mind and began to smooth them over, pouring a gentle, steady stream of calm into the space between us. It wasn't a thought.
It was a feeling, a quiet wave of reassurance that said, "It's okay. You've got this. We've got this." I opened my eyes. Across the stands, Chloe's shoulders, which had been tight and high, softened. The frantic energy around her seemed to slow, and a genuine, unburdened smile replaced the bright, brittle one from moments before. Her gaze lifted, sweeping over the crowd until it found mine. Her eyes locked on me. There was no confusion, no surprise, just a quiet, knowing look of gratitude that was more intimate than any shouted word. In that silent exchange, the roaring stadium and the thousands of people faded into a meaningless blur. There was only her and me. This connection, this silent, secret language was the only thing that made my strange, noisy world feel solid. Her friends finally began to move, gathering their things as the game wound down. Chloe lingered, her eyes still on me, before her phone buzzed in her hand. A moment later, mine vibrated in my pocket. "Chloe, I have the best news. We need to celebrate." My heart gave a nervous flutter. I typed back, "Me. Did we win?" I wasn't watching. "Chloe, forget the game. Something way better. My parents said I can finally bring you home for the weekend. They want to meet you." The air rushed out of my lungs. Meet her family. The perfect, mysterious family she spoke of with such loving reverence, who lived in the secluded, beautiful house she called Whisperwood. It was everything I wanted. "Chloe, it's going to be perfect, Elara. I promise." I smiled, a real, bone-deep smile. But as I looked back at her, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A woman, standing at the edge of the bleachers near Chloe, elegant, poised, with Chloe's same honey-colored hair, was watching us. Her expression was placid, almost warm, but what I felt from across the field was something else entirely. It was a cold, sharp spike of appraisal, as smooth and chilling as a sliver of ice. The woman's lips curved into a smile, and then, as if she had never been there at all, she was gone.
Chapter 2. The drive to Whisperwood felt like ascending into a different, better world. We left the cracked pavement and strip malls behind, winding up a long, private road flanked by ancient oak trees that knit their branches together overhead. Sunlight dappled the hood of Chloe's car, and with every mile, I could feel the city's anxious static fading from my senses, replaced by the clean, green hum of the countryside. Whisperwood wasn't a house. It was a statement, a sprawling, white-gabled home nestled in a valley of impossible green, with a porch that wrapped around it like a loving arm. It looked safe. It looked real. Chloe's parents, Corinne and Mark, were just as flawless as their home. Corinne, the woman from the football game, greeted me with a hug that smelled of lavender and cashmere, her smile warm and immediate. Mark's handshake was firm, his eyes kind. They moved with an easy, practiced grace, and their love for Chloe was a palpable thing, a warm glow that filled every room. For the first few hours, I felt myself relax completely. This was it. This was the stable, loving family I had always craved, and they were welcoming me into it. The cold spike of appraisal I'd felt at the game must have been my own nerves, a misreading of the emotional currents. The unsettling quiet didn't begin until dinner. We sat around a heavy mahogany table that shone with the polish of generations. The conversation was light, easy. They asked about my job at the library, my plans after graduation. It didn't feel like an interrogation, just a genuine curiosity. Elara wants to go to UCLA for their archival studies program, Chloe announced proudly, her hand finding mine under the table. She squeezed it. We were just looking at the campus online last night. We could get an apartment in Santa Monica, right by the ocean. Her voice was full of breathless excitement, the same vibrant energy I'd felt from her as we'd scrolled through pictures of dorm rooms just 24 hours ago. The light scrape of Mark's knife against his plate was the only sound in the sudden stillness that followed. The warmth in the room didn't vanish, it congealed, becoming something thick and heavy. A polite, smiling pressure settled over the table.
Corinne reached out, her perfectly manicured fingers resting gently on Chloe's wrist. Her smile never faltered. It was a work of art. "Darling," she said, her voice like honeyed tea, "that sounds lovely, but you've always said you wanted to stay close to home. You know how you get homesick. Don't you remember?" The words were soft, coded in concern, but they landed in the center of the table like stones. I watched the confusion cloud Chloe's eyes. A tiny frown line appeared between her brows, a flicker of a storm on a calm sea. Her gaze darted to me, a silent, searching question in their depths. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent, "Yes, you do remember. We talked for hours." But Chloe's eyes slid away from mine and back to her mother's serene face. I felt it then, a gentle, insistent push against Chloe's mind, a quiet rewriting of the emotional code. And then I felt the spark of our shared dream, the bright, fierce desire that had burned in her just a moment ago, get extinguished. It wasn't a fade, it was a snuff. One moment it was there, the next, only a wisp of smoke remained. Chloe blinked and the confusion was gone, replaced by a placid certainty. "You're right," she said, her voice a little flat. She slipped her hand out of mine. The conversation picked back up, flowing smoothly around the rock her words had just thrown. Mark began talking about a new wing at the local university, and Chloe nodded along, engaged and cheerful. But my food had turned to ash in my mouth. Everyone was smiling, the picture of a happy family, but a sinkhole had just opened beneath my feet. I looked at the girl across from me, the girl I loved, who was now discussing a future that we had never, not once, spoken of. And a cold, terrifying certainty washed over me. She didn't remember. She didn't remember at all.
Chapter 3. Sleep was a locked room, and I couldn't find the key. I lay in the guest bed, the sheets feeling too smooth, too cold against my skin. The silence of Whisperwood wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall below sounded like a judgment. Corinne's words echoed in the dark. "Don't you remember?" The gentle, loving way she had said it, the surgical precision with which she had excised a piece of Chloe's soul right at the dinner table, and Chloe's easy acceptance of the lie. I don't know what I was thinking. The memory of it made my stomach clench. This wasn't a simple case of overprotective parents. It was something else, something fundamentally wrong. Giving up on sleep, I slid out of bed. The floorboards were cold beneath my bare feet. I had to see her. I had to just look at her, sleeping and peaceful, and reassure myself that the real Chloe, my Chloe, was still in there. The hallway was a river of shadows, carved by the moonlight slicing through the tall, mullioned windows. I crept toward Chloe's room, every creak of the old house a potential betrayal. But as I neared the grand staircase, I saw it. A thin sliver of golden light spilling from the library downstairs, painting a warm line across the dark wood of the hall floor. A low, murmuring sound rose from within. Voices. My first thought was that Corinne and Mark were having a late-night drink, but the cadence was strange. It wasn't a conversation, it was a litany. Drawn by an instinct I couldn't name, I changed course. I descended the stairs, one by one, staying in the deepest shadows. The library door was ajar. Peeking through the narrow opening, my heart stopped. Chloe was lying on a long velvet chaise lounge, fast asleep. But she wasn't alone. Her parents stood over her, one on each side. They weren't speaking to each other, but to her. Their hands weren't touching her, just hovering inches from her temples, palms down, as if warming themselves by an invisible fire. "She is happy here," Corinne murmured, her voice a hypnotic drone. "Her path is clear. The confusion is gone. There is only peace. Only home." I couldn't breathe. I pressed my hand to my mouth, stifling a gasp as I felt a ripple in the very air of the room. It was a psychic pressure, a gentle but irresistible force.
through my own empathic sense, I felt a flicker from deep within Chloe's subconscious, a faint, distrust pulse, like a moth beating against glass. A moment of struggle. And then I felt a wave of absolute artificial serenity wash it away, smoothing the disturbance until there was nothing left but a placid surface. I watched the faint line of tension on Chloe's sleeping face relax into a vacant calm. I backed away, my movements jerky and silent. I fled up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs, and locked myself in the guest room, my back pressed against the door until the sun came up. The Chloe who met me for breakfast was a beautiful, polite stranger. She hummed as she poured orange juice, her cheerfulness a fresh coat of paint over everything we were. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, her smile bright and empty. It didn't reach her eyes. "Chloe," I started, my voice trembling, "about last night, about UCLA." She gave a little laugh, a sound as clear and hollow as a bell. "Oh, that! Gosh, I was being so silly. I'm so glad Mom reminded me. My place is here." She looked at me, her head tilted, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of the girl I knew, but it was gone. "You look tired, Elara. Are you feeling all right?" I looked at her, at the placid contentment on her face, and the full, horrifying truth crashed down on me. They hadn't just convinced her. They had curated her. They had reached into her mind and pruned away the thoughts, the desires they didn't like, leaving behind only what they wanted to see. My goal was no longer to understand. My fear had crystallized into something cold and hard. This beautiful, sun-drenched house wasn't a home. It was a cage designed with such loving perfection that the prisoner would never even think to rattle the bars. And I was the only one who could see them.
Chapter 4. Logic. That's what I had to cling to. Magic, or whatever that strange silent pressure in the library had been, didn't respond to feelings. It responded to power. But reality was built on facts. And I had facts. I waited until after lunch when Chloe suggested a walk through the sprawling, manicured gardens behind the house. The sun was warm, the air sweet with the scent of late-blooming roses. It was the perfect peaceful setting for what I had to do. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. "Can I ask you something?" I began, keeping my voice as level as I could. "Anything," she said, linking her arm through mine. The casual affection of the gesture was a knife to the gut. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands slick with sweat. I opened our text thread, scrolling up to 2 nights ago. "Do you remember sending me this?" I held the screen up. Her own words, glowing in a blue bubble. "UCLA website is my new obsession. Found the perfect beachfront apartment for us, ! Followed by a string of heart emojis. She leaned in, her brow furrowed in concentration. The polite confusion I was beginning to dread settled over her features. "I don't," she said slowly. "That's weird. I must have been half asleep." "You weren't. We were on the phone for an hour after," I pressed, my voice rising with a frantic edge I couldn't suppress. I dug into my jacket pocket and pulled out the pamphlets I'd stuffed in there before we left, the glossy paper already creased from my anxious grip. You grabbed these from the counselor's office for us. You circled the dorm buildings." She took the pamphlet for UCLA, her fingers tracing the bright, sun-drenched photo on the cover. She looked at it as if it were a relic from a foreign country. "Elara, I really don't remember this. Maybe you're getting things mixed up." "I'm not mixed up." The words burst out of me, too loud, too sharp. "Girls, is everything all right?" Mark was standing at the edge of the rose garden, holding a small leather-bound book. His expression was one of gentle concern. "Dad, it's fine," Chloe said,
quickly handing the pamphlet back to me as if it were burning her fingers. Elara's just a little confused about something. The word hung in the air between us. Confused. "Ah," Mark said, his eyes filled with a deep paternal sympathy that made my skin crawl. He walked toward us. "I think I might know what's going on. I was tidying Chloe's desk and this fell. I know I shouldn't have looked honey to Chloe, but the page was open." He handed the journal to Chloe. Her own handwriting, a familiar, loopy cursive, filled the page. She read it silently, her eyes widening. Then, with a pained apology, she handed it to me. October 12th, it read, "I'm worried about Elara. I love her so much, but sometimes it feels like she's pushing her dreams onto me. This whole California thing, it's all she talks about. It's becoming so intense, so overbearing. I feel like I'm suffocating. I told her I'm not sure, but I don't think she's listening. It's like she remembers our conversations differently than they actually happen." The world tilted. The perfectly crafted lies written in the hand of the person I trusted most were a masterstroke. It was my word against her own, my memory against a physical, tangible diary. "Elara, I'm so sorry," Chloe whispered, her eyes full of pity, not for herself, but for me. She took a small step back, breaking the link between our arms. The chasm that opened in that tiny space felt a mile wide. I stood there, phone in one hand, pamphlets in the other, the useless, flimsy evidence of a reality that no longer existed. They hadn't just erased my girlfriend. They were trying to erase me. And as I looked at Chloe's worried, pitying face, a terrifying new thought crept in, cold and sharp. What if they were succeeding?
Chapter 5. Paranoia is a cold, creeping thing. It lived in the corners of my eyes, in the feeling of being watched as I walked down the hall. It was in the way Corinne's smile seemed a little too bright, a little too fixed. After the incident with the diary, they were handling me with a delicate, suffocating care, as if I were a fragile object about to break, or a bomb about to go off. Facts were their weapons now, not mine. They could forge a diary, create a narrative, and paint me as the unstable one with terrifying ease. Logic was a game they had already rigged. So I had to stop playing. If I couldn't appeal to Chloe's mind, I would have to appeal to her heart. Some things I had to believe couldn't be rewritten. A memory forged in pure, overwhelming emotion had to leave a deeper scar than their placid revisions. And I know exactly which one to choose. "I need some air," I announced the next afternoon, my voice carefully neutral. "A real walk. Let's go down to the lake." She hesitated, glancing toward the house. "I don't know." "Please," I said, meeting her gaze. I didn't push any feelings her way. I just let her see the exhaustion in my eyes. The plea to her kindness worked. She agreed. We walked in near silence, the path to the lake a familiar one from a happier time. We passed the main shore, and I led her further, along a barely there trail choked with ferns, until the trees opened up into a hidden cove. It was our place. A small, perfect crescent of pebbled beach sheltered by a granite overhang. The water was dark and still. "Why are we here?" she asked, a note of unease in her voice. "Do you remember it?" I asked softly, sitting on the flat, sun-warmed rock where it had all happened. I patted the space beside me. Hesitantly, she sat. "I don't think so." "Close your eyes," I whispered. When she did, I began to talk. I didn't recount facts. I painted a picture. It was after the spring dance. It was so cold you were shivering in that ridiculous blue sweater you love. Remember the smell of the pine needles after the rain? You said it smelled like fresh starts. I watched her face. Nothing. I pressed on, my voice barely a breath. "And you were terrified I was going to push you in the water, but I didn't. I just held your hand. And you leaned your head on my shoulder and told me you'd never felt so completely seen. Those were your words. Seen."
I felt it then. A faint flicker, a tiny fragile pulse of warmth from deep within her, a signal cutting through the static of her conditioning. It was her. And then, I said, my own voice thick with the memory, I kissed you. Right here. And it felt like... Her eyes snapped open. The polite confusion was gone. They were clear, focused, and shining with a terrifying, beautiful recognition. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time all weekend, I felt her love, pure and overwhelming, rush toward me. I remember, she breathed, the words a fragile miracle. A branch snapped behind us, loud as a gunshot. Chloe! Her brother Ethan crashed through the trees, his face a mask of frantic panic. Thank God I found you. It's Mom. She fell down the stairs. It's bad. The urgency in his voice was a physical blow, but beneath it, I felt the lie. As an empath, I could feel the cold, calculated performance humming under his feigned terror. He was projecting panic, but his core was perfectly calm. Chloe was on her feet in an instant, the fragile memory shattering. The girl who remembered our kiss was gone, replaced by the dutiful daughter. Is she okay? We have to go. She scrambled up the path, Ethan's hand already on her back, guiding her, rushing her away from me, away from the truth. He glanced back for a single, chilling second. There was no panic in his eyes, only a cold, triumphant victory. The family wasn't just watching me anymore. They were fighting back, and they were faster, stronger, and more ruthless than I had ever imagined.
Chapter 6. 2 days. It had only been 2 days, and the foundations of my mind were full of hairline cracks. I would look at a teacup on a saucer and feel a wave of vertigo, wondering if it had been there a moment ago. I caught my reflection in a hallway mirror and saw a wild-eyed stranger. They were winning. The constant, placid gaslighting was working, and a terrifying whisper had taken root in my soul. What if they're right? What if you are broken? I couldn't survive another day of this. I needed proof, an anchor in the swirling chaos of my own head. And secrets, I knew, always drift upward. While the family was occupied in the garden after dinner, their laughter a sickeningly sweet sound floating through the open windows, I made my ascent. The attic stairs groaned under my feet, each creak a potential siren. At the top, a small, solid door stood in my way. It was locked. Of course it was. I fumbled with a bobby pin from my hair, my fingers clumsy with panic, and jammed it into the old keyhole. After a series of scrapes and a final, jarring click, the lock gave way. The air that hit me was thick with the dust of forgotten things. In the faint light of a single dormer window, I saw the ghosts of a life. Shrouded furniture, stacks of old magazines, and in the farthest corner, a heavy, leather-strapped trunk. A faded, water-stained tag was tied to the handle. In elegant, looping script, it read, Genevieve. Chloe had mentioned her once, Great Aunt Genevieve, the one who'd had a breakdown and been sent away. With trembling hands, I forced the rusty latches. Inside, nestled among moth-eaten silks and yellowed photographs, was a small, suede-bound journal. I opened it. The handwriting was frantic, spidery. They tell me I'm forgetting, the first entry I saw read. William says I'm remembering things all wrong. He is so kind when he says it, so concerned. It makes the poison go down easier. I sank to the floor, the dust motes dancing in the single beam of light. I read on, my blood turning to ice. It was all there. The subtle corrections, the rewritten conversations, the feigned concern. They hadn't invented this for me. It was a practiced, perfected art. They were a family of psychological poisoners. Then, near the end, I found the entry that changed everything. He cannot take it all, Genevieve had written, her script nearly illegible. He can rewrite a conversation, a decision, a thought, but he cannot touch a memory tied to the body. A fall from a horse, the sting of a burn from the stove, a kiss that bruises, something the skin remembers when the mind is told to forget. A weapon,
She had given me a weapon. That night, I didn't wait. Fueled by Genevieve's ghostly rage and my own desperate hope, I slipped from my room and crept to Chloe's. The door was unlocked. Inside, moonlight painted silver stripes across her bed. She wasn't sleeping. She was staring at the ceiling, a single tear tracing a path to her ear. The memory from the cove had left a splinter in her mind. "Chloe," I whispered. She sat bolt upright, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a deep, painful confusion. "Elara? I keep seeing things. A lake? You? They're lying to you," I whispered, moving to the edge of her bed. The air was thick with the terror of being caught, a live wire that only fueled my resolve. I reached out, not with my hand, but with my gift, pouring all of my frantic, desperate love into the space between us. I pushed away the doubt, the confusion, and sent one clear message. Don't think, just feel. Feel what's real. For a heartbeat, she resisted. I felt the smooth, placid walls of their conditioning hold fast. And then, with the force of my emotional truth, they shattered. The change was instantaneous and violent. She surged forward, not into a gentle embrace, but into a desperate reclamation. Her mouth crashed against mine, a frantic, searching kiss that wasn't about love, but about truth. It was a frantic press of bodies, a tangle of limbs on the rumpled sheets, driven by the primal, terrifying need to not be torn apart again. Her fingers dug into my back, anchoring me, anchoring herself. Every touch was a desperate attempt to ground us in a reality only we shared, a frantic confirmation of our existence against a world of lies. For those few stolen, breathless minutes, our shared passion was the only truth in the universe. It was a memory of teeth and tears and touch, a blazing sensory brand, a memory, I prayed, that they could never, ever erase.
Chapter 7. The morning after felt fragile, like a world made of spun glass. A dangerous, exhilarating hope hummed in my veins. The memory we had forged was a secret fire, and when I saw Chloe at the breakfast table, I knew it was still burning. She was quiet, her movements uncertain. The placid, cheerful mask was gone, replaced by a raw, beautiful confusion. She kept looking at me, her eyes full of searching questions, her hand hovering near her own lips as if still feeling the ghost of a kiss. She remembered. I knew she did. And so did they. Corinne was the first to notice. She set a porcelain teapot on the table, her movements as graceful as ever, but her eyes were fixed on her daughter. I felt a subtle, probing tendril of her power touch Chloe's mind, and then recoil, as if touching a hot stove. "Chloe, darling," Corinne said, her voice dangerously sweet, "pour Elara a cup of tea." It was a test, a simple command. Chloe hesitated, her gaze still locked on mine. In that moment of defiance, the world snapped into focus. Mark rose from his chair and stood by the dining room door. Ethan moved to stand behind his sister's chair. The trap was sprung. "It seems our guest has been a bad influence," Corinne said, her smile finally vanishing, replaced by something cold and ancient. And then they turned on me. It wasn't a physical attack, it was infinitely worse. The air in the room grew thick, heavy, vibrating with a low, malevolent hum. It was the combined force of all of them, a psychic battering ram aimed directly at my mind. "You were so desperate, Elara, so desperate to be right, you didn't care who you hurt. You forced your way in," Mark's voice added, a bass note of judgment that vibrated in my bones. "You saw a lock and you broke it." I tried to fight, to cling to the truth of the previous night, the shared terror, the mutual desperation. Chloe's searching hands. It was real. I screamed in the confines of my own mind. We chose it together. But they had my secret. I felt them pluck it from the depths of my memory, the one I had buried so deep. The image of my own mother, weeping in confusion after I had flooded her with my emotional rage. They took that shame and they weaponized it. "You have a talent for it, don't you?" Corinne's voice,
whispered, slick with poison, making people feel what you want them to feel. You did it to your mother, and now you've done it to our Chloe. They took the memory of last night and began to twist it. They didn't erase it. They expertly re-edited it scene by scene. My desperate plea became a psychic command. My loving gaze became a predator's stare. Chloe's kiss of reclamation was repainted as an act of terrified submission to my overwhelming will. The sensory details remained, the frantic press of our bodies, the taste of her lips, but the emotional truth was inverted into something monstrous. The illusion was perfect because it was built on the foundation of my deepest fear. It felt more real than the truth. The guilt was a cold, heavy weight settling in my gut. My spirit didn't just break, it dissolved. The fight went out of me, replaced by a wave of sickening self-loathing. Oh God, I thought, the words a death knell. What have I done? I'm no better than them. I am the villain. As I crumpled inward, lost in the labyrinth of my own manufactured crime, Corinne turned her attention to her daughter. It's all right now, my love. She placed her hands on Chloe's temples. I looked up, my vision blurring with tears of shame. I saw Chloe's face, which had been a canvas of confused struggle, go utterly blank. The light in her eyes just went out. A full reset. Then slowly, she turned to look at me. There was no recognition, no love, no confusion. There was only a raw, instinctive terror. She flinched, pulling away from me as if I were something diseased, something vile. I was left kneeling on the floor in a room of smiling monsters, shattered by a crime I now believed I had committed. I had not saved the person I loved. I had violated her. And in doing so, I had lost her forever.
Chapter 8. They brought me to the parlor. It was where they had welcomed me, and it was where they would unmake me. I was a doll whose stuffing had been pulled out, a hollow thing sitting in a plush armchair as they moved around me, their voices calm, clinical. My mind was a swamp of their making, and I was drowning in it, suffocated by the thick, oily memory of my own monstrosity. It's a kindness, really, Corinne said, standing before the fireplace. The light cast her in a benevolent, motherly glow. Just a final tidying. We'll remove the pain, the confusion. We'll leave peace. Silence. Erasure. The same fate they had planned for Chloe. My spirit was too broken to even struggle. I deserved it. I had hurt her. I had forced her. I had taken something beautiful and twisted it into something ugly. The shame was a physical weight, pressing the air from my lungs. I retreated from the sound of their voices, sinking into the darkness of my own mind. I let the poisoned memories wash over me, a final, deserved penance. There was the library, my hands hovering over a sleeping Chloe. There was the bedroom, my touch a violation, her kiss a surrender to my psychic assault. But then, as Corinne took a step toward me, something else surfaced from the deep. A flicker. Not a thought, not an emotion, a sensation. Something the skin remembers when the mind is told to forget. Genevieve's words, a ghostly whisper from a dusty journal. It was there, beneath the layers of their lies. An echo. The rough, comforting texture of Chloe's cotton bedsheets against the bare skin of my back. The sharp, desperate taste of her lips, a flavor of salt and mint, and a truth so profound it ached. The feeling of her fingers, not limp in surrender, but digging into my shoulders, holding on as if she was the one who was drowning. They had poisoned the why. They had twisted the emotional narrative into something unrecognizable. But they couldn't fake the what. They couldn't fake the searing, physical reality of two bodies clinging to each other as the only solid things in a crumbling world. The sensory data didn't match the emotional lie. And in that contradiction, their illusion shattered.
A single, clean thought cut through the fog. They lied. I wasn't a monster. I was a mirror. They had shown me my deepest fear, and I had believed it. But the reflection was a distortion. The power I had used on my mother was a frightened child's scream in the dark. What they did, what they were doing now, was a slow, deliberate strangulation in the light. I looked up. Corinne was reaching for me, her expression one of pitying resolve. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it stopped her cold. I rose from the chair, my limbs trembling, not with fear, but with a terrifying, incandescent power. They stared, confused by the sudden shift. They expected a doll broken. They weren't prepared for a goddamn ghost. I realized then that I couldn't untangle their lies. It would take a lifetime, but I didn't have to. I just had to scream a truth so loud it deafened them. I closed my eyes and opened the floodgates. I drew on the memory of what I had done to my mother, not with shame, but with intent. I took every raw, unfiltered emotion inside me and unleashed it in a psychic shockwave. First, the love. A blinding, unconditional light that had been my only anchor. The pure, ferocious love for the real Chloe. The girl who dreamed of oceans and smelled of pine needles after the rain. Then the terror. The cold, sharp-edged fear of watching her be hollowed out. The horror of being erased myself. Then the agony. The dizzying, spiraling pain of their gaslighting, a symphony of screaming nerves from a mind turned against itself. And finally, the rage. A white-hot, righteous rage, not just for me, but for Genevieve in her locked room, and for the girl standing silent in the corner. The coven, so accustomed to precise, placid control, staggered as if struck by a physical blow. The veneer of their composure cracked like porcelain. Mark clutched his head. Ethan flinched back, and Corinne's serene mask dissolved into a snarl of disbelief. They were drowning in the chaotic, messy truth of a human heart, and it was a language they couldn't rewrite. But the storm had an eye. Through the hurricane of my own creation, I focused a single, concentrated beam of power, a laser of pure intent directly at Chloe. I didn't send her the rage or the pain. I sent her only two things: the undiluted, overwhelming force of my love and the raw, undeniable sensory memory of our night together. The taste of her lips, the feeling of her skin, the sound of our breathing in the dark. I screamed it all into her mind without a single word. This was real. This touch was real. This feeling was ours. Remember. Chloe's passive expression broke. Her eyes flew wide, a silent gasp catching in her throat. And through the psychic noise and the crumbling of her prison, her lips formed a single, miraculous word. Elara.
Chapter 9. The moment Chloe spoke my name, the psychic storm I had unleashed found its purpose. It was no longer a chaotic scream, but a focused key, turning a lock deep inside her that had been rusted shut for years. A cry tore from her throat, a sound of such profound, agonizing revelation that it physically shook the room. Her hands flew to her head as the psychic dam her family had so carefully constructed didn't just crack, it exploded. I felt it through our connection, a violent, chaotic flood of stolen life rushing back into the empty spaces of her mind. It was a hurricane of shattered fragments, a scraped knee on a gravel path at age 6, the memory of the pain and her father's soothing voice now tainted by the knowledge that they had erased her tears moments later. A favorite book they'd made her forget because it inspired unsuitable daydreams. The fierce, secret desire for a life in California,
a dream she thought was mine, but now realized had been born in her own heart. Year after year of stolen moments, pruned emotions, and rewritten truths slammed into her consciousness all at once. With the memories came her magic. It erupted from her not as a controlled force, but as an uncontrolled, brilliant energy that made the air in the room hum and the crystal glasses on the sideboard tremble. "Shut it out, Chloe!" Corinne screamed, her voice laced with a raw, desperate panic I had never heard before. She took a step forward, her hands outstretched, not in love, but in the furious attempt to regain control. "That girl is poison! Remember your loyalty! Remember your family!" But it was too late. Chloe lowered her hands, her face streaked with tears, and looked at her mother. For the first time, she wasn't looking at a parent. She was looking at a warden. I felt the final veil lift from her mind. She saw the years of gentle smiles, comforting touches, and loving words for what they were, the gilded bars of a masterfully crafted cage. The love her mother professed was not a gift, but a chain. "You didn't love me," Chloe whispered, her voice resonating with the force of her newfound power. "You loved the doll you could arrange on a shelf." She made her choice. It wasn't a choice for me, not entirely. It was a choice for herself, for the girl who loved the ocean she'd never seen and the person she had never been allowed to become. Turning from me, she faced her family. She raised her hands, not in aggression, but with a quiet, devastating finality. A shimmering silver light, clean and pure, began to emanate from her palms. It wasn't the chaotic emotional power I wielded. It was something else, something precise. "No more," she declared. With a graceful, sweeping gesture, she pushed the light outward. It wasn't an attack, it was a severance. I could suddenly see them, the invisible, psychic threads of control they had woven throughout the house, linking them to every object, every memory, and most tightly to the very core of Chloe's mind. Her magic struck these threads, and a sound like the snapping of 1,000 harp strings echoed in the room, a sound that was both psychic and audible. The threads connected to Chloe disintegrated into silver dust. The larger web that held the house in a state of placid perfection frayed and vanished. The effect on her family was instantaneous. The aura of serene, unshakable authority that had surrounded them evaporated. They looked smaller, older, shockingly ordinary. Their power, I realized, wasn't a wellspring from within themselves, but a parasitic force they drew from their control over her. Without their prisoner, the wardens were just people. My own psychic storm died down, its purpose served. I sagged against the armchair, completely drained, my head pounding. The oppressive, perfect atmosphere of the house was gone, as if a window had been thrown open in a room that had been sealed for a century. In the ringing silence, Chloe stood trembling but upright in the wreckage of her old life. She slowly turned to me, her eyes clear and free for the first time. She took a step, then another, and reached out, her hand finding mine. The cage was broken, and for the first time, we were truly, terrifyingly free.
Chapter 10. The air in our apartment always tastes faintly of salt. It's a constant, gentle reminder that the Pacific Ocean is only 3 blocks away. A vast, restless expanse of blue that feels like the polar opposite of the still, suffocating woods we left behind. Our new life is small and a little bare. The furniture is mostly secondhand, and the walls are still waiting for pictures. But it's a space that is entirely, blessedly ours. It's been 6 months. The nightmares haven't vanished completely, but they come less frequently now. Sometimes I'll wake up with the ghost feeling of my own thoughts being twisted into unfamiliar shapes. Sometimes Chloe will wake from a dream of a locked room she can't quite remember. On those nights, we don't talk. We just hold on to each other, our own living, breathing anchors in the dark until the sun comes up. Tonight, there are no nightmares.
I'm curled on our lumpy sofa, a textbook on archival theory open in my lap, and I'm watching Chloe. She's sitting on the floor, surrounded by a dozen small, smooth stones she collected from the beach. Her eyes are closed in concentration, and one of the stones is hovering an inch above her palm, spinning in a slow, lazy circle. There's no grand purpose to it. She's not trying to achieve anything. She's just playing, getting to know the strange, beautiful power inside her on her own terms, without the weight of her family's expectations. After a moment, the stone wobbles and clatters back onto the floorboards. She opens her eyes and catches me watching, a small, shy smile touching her lips. "Still can't get the hang of the big ones," she says, her voice light. "I made a pebble float. That's pretty damn magical to me." Her smile widens. I can feel the pure, uncomplicated joy radiating from her, a feeling as warm and steady as the late afternoon sun slanting through our window. There are no placid surfaces to skim, no hidden anxieties to soothe. It's just her, raw, real, and finally, completely herself. My empathy, once a secret I guarded with shame and fear, is now the bridge that connects us. It's not a tool for manipulation, it's a language for understanding. I no longer feel the need to push away the cacophony of the world, because the single clear note of her happiness is all the anchor I'll ever need. The strength that saved us wasn't just my power or hers. It was the moment we chose to trust what we felt over what we were told. She gets up and comes over to the sofa, tucking herself beside me and resting her head on my shoulder. We sit in a comfortable silence for a while, just watching the dust motes dance in the golden light. "Sometimes," she says softly, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my arm, "I try to remember their faces, my parents, and it's blurry, like a photograph left out in the rain." "Is that sad?" I ask, my voice quiet. She's silent for a long moment. "It's just blank," she finally says, and I feel a profound sense of peace in her words, not sorrow, and I'm okay with that. I press a kiss to the top of her head. We are scarred, of course. We are two people piecing together a life from the wreckage of a war no one else will ever know we fought. But we are free. Outside, the sun begins to set, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet. The future is no longer a path laid out for us, or a nightmare to escape from. It's just this, a quiet room, the sound of the ocean, and a blank page waiting for us to write the next line together.
What if the only person who truly saw you was being forced to forget you? Hey everyone, and welcome back to Real Love, the place where we dive into the most captivating stories that feel as real and as powerful as the emotions they evoke. Today, we are continuing our journey into the chilling, psychological world of the Memory Weavers of Whisperwood. If you're new here, you are about to step into a story that is so much more than just a fantasy. It's an exploration of trust, identity, and the desperate fight to hold on to love when reality itself is being rewritten. This book will challenge you, it will make you question everything, and it will show you the incredible strength it takes to trust your own heart against all odds. The benefits aren't just in the escape. They're in feeling that powerful struggle and rooting for a love that refuses to be erased. So, get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's lose ourselves in the beautiful, dangerous world of Whisperwood. The story continues now.